Good evening, everyone. This is our study group, Spiritist Psychology, and I would like to hand it over to Anaí for our discussion tonight. Over to you, Anaí.
Thank you, Fabricio. Hello, everyone. So I'll just share the screen and let's see if it works. Is that okay, Fabricio?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so we are in part 2 of Anima and Animus, our discussion. So this is just a reminder of Jung's model of the psyche, so that we can have in mind that in the core, in the nucleus of all the complexes, we find the correspondent archetype, okay? That's the one thing that I want everyone to remember. And we have already seen some of the first slides, the first PowerPoints, but I wanted also for us to bring to our conscious mind again, okay, that what Jung, when he created this concept of anima and animus, he was defining the unconscious opposite to the social mask of personality that we have already seen, the persona, thus being an archetype that links the conscious ego to the unconscious. I think this is a basic thing for us to have in mind, okay, when we are talking about anima and animus in our discussion here. And an archetypal image, so we are talking about that too, that contains all those features and functions that are present in the psyche in a more or less latent form, but are not manifested in the conscious life, and so not available to the conscious ego, okay? And I also another reminder that we are not talking exactly about, the concepts of the masculine gender and the feminine, but we are talking about the unconscious psyche as a counterpart of the conscious identity, okay? And the notion also of a healthy balance of different functions in the psyche that helps the individual to evaluate and stimulates growth and development of consciousness. So this, I think it's very, very important when we are talking about Jung's psychology and his contributions. So another reminder that anima is usually related to the emotional, empathetic, and sensitive aspects, while animus is related to the active, intellectual, exploring side of the personality, okay? And so these definitions should by no means be perceived as literally describing certain characteristics, but that these images serve as symbols and are the abstractions of active animus and reflective anima, these principles, okay? So anima, when we talked about mirrors of the soul, contribution by Gelson Roberto, he's an author of this book, Mirrors of the Soul, by Divaldo and Joana de Angelis. So anima and animus can be understood as relational structures that represent aspects of the individual soul. They are relational complexes because they have in their function this quality and role in the psyche, okay? And that according to Jung, as we partially integrate these opposites within ourselves, making them conscious, we increase our personal capacity to deal with the complexity of other people. This is very, very important, isn't it? So as archetypes, okay, when we are talking about the archetypes, they represent essential forces of the soul that organize and apprehend reality. So we talked about yin and yang last meeting. So the feminine and masculine qualities, okay? And also to remember that the spirit does not have sex in the narrow sense that we understand it biologically. And that in its nature, it is both feminine and masculine, needing to experience these two realities in its evolutionary process, okay? And that the anima and animus are forces of connection of the self in a relationship of complementation and compensation, so that the psyche can fully relate with itself and with the world. So you see the importance of anima and animus as archetypes, as forces of connection of the self, okay? And that in dreams, as we saw last meeting, the anima and animus archetype manifests in figures of strangers that are very attractive and invite us to travel to the unknown. Isn't the unconscious a known part of ourselves? So the presence of these archetypal images is perceived by their sudden and captivating effect and a sense of being blessed or awakened. So let's see then the animals, the man within. This title is on purpose, as I told you, because this is a summary, a very short summary of the beautiful chapter by von Franz, Marie-Louise von Franz, in Man and His Symbols, okay? So she says that the animals then, the man within, is the male personification of the unconscious in woman, the animus. And so it exhibits both good and bad aspects, and as does the anima in man. It is more apt to take the form of a hidden sacred conviction, okay? One may suddenly find oneself up against something in a woman that is obstinate, cold, and completely inaccessible. Remember that we are talking about relational functions also. So the way that here, okay, Marie-Louise von Franz is giving examples of the relation, what we can observe in a woman about her animus, okay? Just as the character of a man's anima is shaped by his mother, as we've seen, so the animus is basically influenced by a woman's father. The father endows his daughter's animus with the special coloring of unarguable, incontestably true convictions, convictions that never include the personal reality of the woman herself as she actually is. And when we are talking about that, of course, we are talking about the complex part of the animals, okay? The animals as a complex. So the negative animals appear sometimes as a death demon in myths and fairy tales, but also playing the role of robber and murderer as the character Bluebird, for instance. Remember that he took his wives to a hidden chamber and kills them. So this particular form of the animus lures women away from all human relationships and especially from all contacts with real men. He personifies a cocoon of dreamy thoughts filled with desire and judgments about how things ought to be, which cut a woman off from the reality of life. So like the anima, the animus does not merely consist of negative qualities, such as brutality, recklessness, empty talk, and silent, obstinate, evil ideas. He too has a very positive and valuable side. He too can build a bridge to the self through his creative activity. Thanks God, right? So the animus often appears in dreams as a group of men, for instance. In this way, the unconscious symbolizes the fact that the animus represents a collective rather than a personal element. Because of this collective mindedness, women actually refer, when their animus is speaking through them, to one or they or everybody, and in such circumstances, their speech frequently contains the words always and should and ought. A vast number of myths and fairy tales tell of a prince turned by witchcraft into a wild animal or monster, for instance, Beauty and the Beast, who is redeemed by the love of a girl, a process symbolizing the manner in which the animus becomes conscious. The conscious attention a woman has to give to her animus problem takes much time and involves a lot of suffering. But if she realizes who and what her animus is and what he does to her, and if she faces these realities instead of allowing herself to be possessed, her animus can turn into an invaluable inner companion who endows her with the masculine qualities of initiative, courage, objectivity, and spiritual wisdom. Then we have the 4 stages in the development of the animus. In the first stage, he appears as a personification of mere physical power, for instance, and as an athletic champion or muscle man like Tarzan von Frances. It's an example. I'll show you in an image of other. In the next stage, the second, he possesses initiative and the capacity for planned action, but is still like a romantic figure, okay? In the third phase, the animus becomes the word, often appearing as a professor or clergyman, like in the second, like a poet, for instance, and in the third, like a professor or a clergyman. In the fourth, in his fourth manifestation, the animus is the incarnation of meaning. And here to remember that when we talk about meaning in life, finding meaning in life, nowadays we are talking about spirituality, okay? So von Franz says that in this fourth manifestation, the animus is the incarnation of meaning. On this highest level, he becomes like the anima, a mediator of the religious experience whereby life acquires new meaning. He gives the woman spiritual firmness and an invisible inner support that compensates for her outer softness. The animus, in von Franz's words, the animus in his most developed form sometimes connects the woman's mind with the spiritual evolution of her age, and can thereby make her even more receptive than a man to new creative ideas. It is for this reason that in earlier times, women were used by many nations as diviners and seers. The creative boldness of their positive animals at times expresses thoughts and ideas that stimulate man to new enterprises. We can discuss this later, and I think it's very interesting to think about what's happening nowadays, with women animals, for instance, and how much are we really developing, getting to this fourth stage or not, where we can be receptive to new creative ideas and to the spiritual evolution of our age. I would like to discuss this later with you. So remember I told you I was in Uruguay. This is Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay, for anyone who has been there. This is a monument to the Gaúchos, and of course I'm paying some respect because I'm also a Gaúcha, because I live in the very south of Brazil. So it's a common ancestor among Argentina, Uruguay, and my state in the very south of Brazil, the Gaúcho, like the cowboys in the United States, okay? So when I was there, I knew I was going to give you this class, and I said, oh, I'll take a picture of the Gaúcho in Montevideo as an example of probably the first and the second, more or less, stage of the Animus, because they were very strong, but also they would sing by the fireplace where they were having barbecue, and they would, take the animals through long distance, but they would sing and they would tell tales, okay? So to my right, I think we should say like this, I don't know if people are looking, so it's my right, in the blue sky is the Gaúcho from Porto Alegre. When he was young, okay, the statue was made. It's a very typical Gaúcho here in Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil. And the model died of old age some few years ago, but we all love him and the statue. So, and to my left is the Gaúcho from Uruguay. So you can see there's not much of a difference. So, and here it was in a park in Montevideo, and I said, oh, the second to the third to the fourth stage of the animal that everybody knows, Confucius from China, okay, a philosopher and thinker from the 4th to 5th century before Christ. And it's in a park in Montevideo. And to my right, it's in Spanish, The Great Harmony, a text that he wrote. And it's beautiful. I think you can look in the Wikipedia, you are going to see the whole text, The Great Harmony. So I thought it was a synchronicity when I was thinking of the class, and I brought to you some images from Montevideo. Well, then let's go back to, or actually what Joanna tells us about Anima and Animus. In the beautiful book Encounters with Peace and Health, chapter 4, she says, in our personal concept, the self encompasses all other archetypes or is responsible for their existence, especially harmonizing the anima and the animals, whose contents constitute the perfect synthesis with regards to the sexual manifestations of the being, storing the experiences lived previously, sometimes in one biological organization, sometimes in another. Since the self is asexual in its psychological structure, it advances on the human evolutionary path in search of its individuation, assimilating the transcendent merits of the anima and of the animus, in order to overcome the biological constraints of the physiological anatomy, resulting in psychological and behavioral harmony. I think this is a beautiful summary, let's say, of our evolutionary path as spirits, because we are going in each reincarnation to be experiencing different patterns and manifesting, as Professor Corbett, that is here with us and is going to be talking to you in a while. We are going to manifest different archetypes in different reincarnations, in different lives. So we experience them. To have all this experience, of course, sorry for the repetition of the word, and inside, let's say, as a richness of our spirit, of all the possibilities of our evolution of consciousness. So we assimilate these transcendent merits, okay, of the anima and the animals. Here, Joanna is talking about the archetypes of anima and animals, to overcome the biological constraints. We are here in a biological body, in order to overcome these constraints of the physiological anatomy, resulting in psychological and behavioral harmony in our evolutionary path. We want to get there. We want to get to this psychological and behavioral harmony. So let's see what she says. When reincarnatory experiences are repeated continuously in an archetype, and then abruptly a change occurs, for instance, if I'm many lives having the experience to being a woman, for instance, and suddenly, and I don't know, don't ask me why, it's not in my, let's talk to the head office, as Professor Corbett calls the ultimate reality, the transcendent one. But what we can observe is that empirically, according to Joanna, and is that when we are reincarnating in a, for instance, in a certain biology and manifesting a certain, having this experience of also a psychology of a certain archetype, okay, for instance, animals or to like a woman. So in my unconscious stays the animals archetype. But, and I manifest here, okay, and I have all this psychology related to my biology. But suddenly, in the next experience, reincarnatory experience, I have to change to, being a man. Then, so abruptly, a change occurs, animals to animal, or vice versa. Anatomy can be inverse to psychology, giving rise to an individual in conflict regarding her sexuality, not infrequently experiencing intimate disorders, emotional insecurity, and fear of assuming the dominant psychological pattern, which is different from the physiological one. So this could happen according to Joanna. And this could account, it's not to everyone, not that it's this way, because we are so complex and we can't have this idea. We don't have the memory of what we planned in the spiritual realms that we would experience. So don't take this as a role for everyone, but I think it's very important that she gives us this reminder that sometimes there is an abrupt change from one life to the other, and we were very used to a certain way or manifesting a certain archetype. It's better. And then suddenly we have to change. And then here on earth, where we don't, still to this day, in this consciousness that we are. We hope to evolve, that we can remember everything that we have been, but it's not for a while that we're going to be doing that. So while our spiritual memory is like for us here, it's not available to the ego, okay? So we have to deal with this sometimes, as Joanna is saying, with this inverse, the way that we feel, for instance, our psychology, maybe it's not totally in according, okay, uh, in accordance to our biology, for instance. And we could have conflicts with this. We could have disorders, emotional insecurity, and fear of assuming the dominant psychological pattern. I think to these days it's becoming easier because I think there is an awakening of our spirituality. So maybe we can talk about this later if you want, but maybe all the gender issues and this and that and people discussing this will in the future end because we will understand the importance of the spirit and not of our, of this experience of the ego. Of course, it is important that we find our own equation, let's say, our own harmony. So that's why we are in this meeting, right? To achieve our personal development, our own self-knowledge, because only each one of us can understand ourselves. Each one of us, each ego, has the ability and the responsibility to talk and to find the answers within oneself. We cannot find answers to each other. We can study together, we can share thoughts, but what is the truth within ourselves, it's the responsibility of ourselves, not of others, okay? So Joanna says that the spirit is free. It blows wherever it wants, as Jesus emphasized in his dialogue with Nicodemus, the famous doctor of the law, and cannot reach the goal of evolution to which it is destined if it is under coercion of any nature. So the law of freedom of thought, speech, and action is conferred on the human being who, in the way she uses it, will be held responsible by her own conscience, which reflects the divine thought, because the divine thought manifests within ourselves. Okay, let's remember when we talk about the self as Imago Dei. We can talk about this with Professor Corbett in a while. I just wanted, before I end this presentation, to give a small example of the Animus. I wrote down the name of the analyst, Kamala Malik, in that link that that we have here in the PowerPoint. And in the International Association for Analytical Psychology, the site that I told you you should go there and see the whole paper. But it's a very interesting, it's not a dream, okay, people? It's a very interesting example about the Animus. Very quickly, a middle-aged married woman, a scientist, academically oriented and ambitious, travels to a foreign country to attend a professional seminar. She is both anxious and excited. She thinks about her presentation and imagines her success. On the plane, she sits next to a very modest and shy man who hardly speaks to her, but the few phrases that he utters describing his recent long bicycle tour and his admiration of nature evoke in her a deep resonance and a memory of her childhood trips to the neighboring countryside, images of the river and the forest that she misses so much in her modern life. The sincerity and serenity of this contact evoke in her a deep longing for a more authentic emotional relation and sadness. The next day she cries as she suddenly realizes how far away she is from her own self, how much she's cut off from something lively and warm, from the simple joys of life and from those whom she loved, but somehow was unable to relate to emotionally, being overwhelmed by her professional ambitions. She doesn't even notice all the things that were so meaningful to her only a few days ago. The vanity of the International Congress she's attending, the desire to demonstrate her own brilliance, the spirited debates. Upon returning home, she gets in a depressive state. With time, however, she finds herself deeply involved in gardening, and little by little, this new side of her creates a new network of friends and like-minded persons. The discoveries coming through her new her new everyday contemplations lead to a new sense of what's of value. Her relationship with her children and husband become more relevant to her, and her scientific mind turns to awareness of ecology and the environment. So Kamala says that here a mother woman, intellectually and socially overactive in a state that we might consider as observed by a masculine social role, rediscovers her soul in a brief but meaningful exchange with a stranger, who in this example is a carrier, the image of her animus, with whose help she returns to her inner values and to the sensitive, deep, emotional, poetic, and contemplative side of her individuality, the side of her where there is still much to explore and wherein lives her capacity to strive for deeply held inner principles and values. And here we are talking about also, of course, her spirituality. So we all want to see Professor Corbett. I will just stop sharing thoughts about Anima and Animus. Lionel?
Thank
With
you,
you.
Annie. Thank you. Well, let me just back up a little. The importance of the anima and animus is a part of Jung's idea that the development of the personality is geared towards completion and wholeness, at least what he calls approximate completion. He doesn't think it can be done perfectly. The value of looking at figures like anima and animus in dreams is that because they are the opposite sex to our own, if we look at the quality of the figure in the dream, the figure will guide us to a deeper level of the unconscious, a deeper level of the psyche than we could have otherwise attained. Even when you have an unknown same-sex figure in the dream, the fact that it's the same sex means that you can learn something from it, but an opposite sex figure is even deeper. So these figures act as bridges to deeper levels of the psyche. That's part of their importance. I should add that some of the Jungian writing on anima and animus is quite sexist by modern standards. That material that Annie talked about was from Man and His Symbol, was written about 1960, I think. So we have come a certain distance from then. It's rather a mistake to equate things like wisdom and spirituality with masculinity. We don't want to do that anymore. You know, what Jung described as anima and animus was really the way well-behaved Swiss ladies and gentlemen were expected to behave in the first part of the 20th century. And he tended to project that into his psychology. But what is absolutely still correct is that we do have these opposite sex figures in our dreams. And if we pay attention to their qualities, they guide us to very deep levels. And I thought I'd just give a couple of examples. One is from a dream of my own many years ago when I was going through a period of professional doubt, when I wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing and if I knew what I was doing and so on. So I had a dream in which there's been a large-scale disaster and there are many very wounded people lying on beds and stretchers in a large building. And an unknown woman who's very magnetic and powerful comes to me and takes me by the hand and guides me to each of these figures lying on their bed. And she tells me that all I have to do to be helpful is to touch them and stay with them a little while. That's a dream that we call a psychopomp dream. It's the anima as a guide of souls. And the traditional theory is that in a man's psyche, the anima will guide the ego into the way he should be behaving. So that was a reassuring dream to me, that nothing very complicated or fancy was required. The metaphor obviously is simply to find a way to touch wounded people. Nothing more complicated than that. Recently, I heard a woman's dream. This is the dream of a woman who has trouble reaching her own authority, her own sense of power. She tends to project it onto other people. And in the dream, she experiences a male figure who's partly a lion. His head reminds her of a lion and his hands look like the claws of a lion. And she realizes that this inner masculine figure was trying to put her in touch with the lion-like qualities in her own nature, which she was not in touch with, her capacity to have authority and power and so on. So that's another very typical example of the way these opposite sex figures can guide us into sort of unknown parts of ourselves. And the other very helpful part of the classical theory is that the animus in a woman must always be in the service of the feminine. So that experience that Annie just talked about of the woman who met this animus figure on the plane, which seemed to stimulate her own capacity, her own interest in ecology and the environment, which are rather feminine interests in some ways. I would say that her animus is now then operating in the service of her femininity. Jung thought that the danger comes when the animus takes over, and instead of being in the service of the feminine, tries to dominate it. All right, would that be enough to start a conversation? Or I could say more, but maybe we could have a conversation.
Yes, let's see if anyone has comments, and we really appreciate people, the comments that everybody does, and that you have Fabricio put in the WhatsApp group. We don't have time to go over, but if anyone wants to now it's the time, wants to ask or go over the questions that remain. Okay, so I just wanted to, I will start then asking Lionel, what do you think about what you wanna, oh, Sylvia, do you wanna go first? You want to ask?
Are we talking to Sylvia? Yes.
You may go first if you want.
No, please.
Okay, I just wanted to hear, Lionel, about what you want to bring this
Oh, I
need.
thought, sorry. I thought that explanation of why there's a conflict between the gender and the body is a marvelous explanation, actually. That there's a sort of carryover from a past life where the soul was a different sex in a past life and now feels like it's in the wrong body. I've never heard that before. I think it's a very interesting explanation.
Okay, so I'll just ask Sylvia to make a
Okay,
question.
just before I ask my question to Lionel, just a point. You probably know that, Anahi, but André Luiz, in the book Sex and Destiny, he makes the same point as Joanna. He talks about the question of reincarnation and the needs that, the confusion sometimes between, and how this in a future, I mean, he was right by 1946, there are a lot of things would be more acceptable, and we are seeing it now. But he makes the very same point about this confusion of being in one place and another. I can't remember exactly the chapter, but I can send it to you. But it's exactly the point that Joanna makes. So it's very interesting that in Spiritism we have different ways as well of looking at that. So the question I like to ask you, please, Lionel. Good evening. Hope you're well. You mentioned, you said that the animus in a woman should be at the service of femininity. Considering, that the many centuries of patriarchy that we had and how women were oppressed and everything, and we seem to be even more now for some reason, should the anima in a woman be at the service of the animus in the case of a man? Should that be also more or less a kind of reciprocated service?
Yes,
Could I understand that?
Yes, no, I think that's correct. The way they describe it is that they say that the anima, the man's ego has to be in a proper relationship to the anima, so that he has access to his femininity in terms of relationship to feelings and so on. But the problem comes on that side when the anima dominates the male ego, and then the man gets too moody. That was the classical theory, but it's the same principle. I think, yeah, you could say it should be in the service of the masculine. I think so. Yeah, it's classically thought of in a man as a guide, like my dream of the psychic of a woman, or Beatrice in Dante. Sort of a guide.
Yes, I mean, she's very much his guide. Well, she asked someone to guide him anyway.
Yes.
Yeah, so this would be in a kind of personality that is balanced, doesn't it? To having service, but how do you see now society, and things seem to have gone so far in one direction that we have lost somehow the sense of what is what and who is who, because it's become, men have become quite effeminate in a negative way, and women have become too masculine. You see even old cartoons and everything, that the man was the hero, now the woman is the hero and the man is just the screamer on the side. Is it distorted? Somehow the society seems to have distorted it. How do you think we can achieve the balance?
I think what's happened was that in the patriarchy, masculinity was quite toxic and dangerous. And so we recognize that. We want a different kind of masculinity now. We don't want the old toxic, domineering masculinity that repressed women and the feminine. So I think the pendulum has swung a bit the other way. I think it'll come back to some middle position, actually. But I don't like the idea of calling men effeminate, because I'm afraid that somehow that seems to suggest that having feminine qualities is something wrong. I don't see why we can't be psychologically androgynous and have a mixture of these qualities.
Yeah, it should be the ideal, but I was just saying that sometimes that's how society emphasize the
Yeah.
role of men. I'm not saying I agree with that.
Oh,
I
yes,
think
yes.
the balance is, but you know, in cartoons, in the literature, in the movies, we see man becoming maybe not femme, but very weak,
Yeah.
and weaker even than the women used to be during patriarchy, because women are
Well,
quite strong.
that's the complaint of the conservative politically. They think that men have become too weak. And the liberal side of the political spectrum think that masculinity has become too toxic. So it sort of depends where you stand in this argument.
But before giving the word to the other people that are, I just wanted to add that I think the most important issue here and the focus of our attention is the anima and animals as archetypes and as psychopomps to the depths of the soul, right?
Yeah, that's the bridging function is to the depth. They link us to what Jung called the spirit of the depth, the deep unconscious part of the psyche, which for Jung is the spiritual dimension.
Yeah, and also for Joanna. So
Yeah.
that's why it's very important. So I think, who is next? Bianca? You?
Yeah, it's just a comment about the gender now and what Joanna says. And I think that the spirit, after he has a few lives like man or woman, is more identified with the gender, and then feels more disturbed when he has to change in a new condition, like woman or man, depends. But this is what he feel. Yeah, and that's why it change. There are a lot of change of sex now, because they are not feeling good in their own body. They are not identified with a gender.
Hmm.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Josada.
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you both for you and Lionel. Yeah, what I wanted to explain from the spiritual perspective, that is more of my field, right? I leave the psychology and psychiatry to you, Dr. Corbett. We cannot be very simplistic in thinking that when we reincarnate, after having had so many incarnations in one gender, that is going to be any kind of confusion. Mostly when this happens is because somehow there is a non-conformism to your new physical body. Either that, or sometimes the spirits tell us as well that it can be when you in one or the other gender have abused too much of your condition. Not only males that would be, abusing from women, but women as well. We know that, they can be very tricky to men. And so there is this need of their also experiencing a different role. But as to what Sylvia was saying in terms of how we see a feminine side more today in males, and in females, maybe the masculinity, I think it's all the oppression that we have lived. I think it was always there. I mean, as males, we come from a society that you were refrained from demonstrating any kind of, weaknesses in crying, showing too much emotion. And as female, you had a determinant role of, being the housewife or something. And now that we do not have this anymore, on the contrary. So I think in both aspects, we can be who we are. We can actually give rise and give way, not to live in a persona that I'm a male, I'm expected to behave this way, and I'm a female, I'm expected to behave that way. But without a doubt, all this, the implication of reincarnations come to add an extra an extra possibility of understanding all how we feel in this life, and having to deal with everything that we have in our unconscious from so many lives, right?
Thank you, Justana. Thank you. And I think Andres wants to talk, and then Anne Sinclair, right? Because you did like that, Andres. Yeah?
Hi, how's everybody? Good
Hi.
evening.
Good evening.
I would just love to share a story, if I may, because this is such a wonderful, interesting subject for me. And it's something actually I truly lived. So I lived it on a very spiritual level. And I never questioned my sexuality, not when I was heterosexual from the age of 12 until I was 21. And then when I met my partner, I was 21 years old. And he was my soulmate. I knew when I was only 6, I would meet my soulmate. I didn't know it was a male. I came with my girlfriend to London, and I was only 21. And there, 4 weeks later, I meet the person I spent 38 years with. So in love. And somebody asked this young man once, I met him, he was 21, what's love for you? And it's like, what's it like being straight and being gay? And I said, nothing to do with straight or gay. We're soulmates. We've traveled through space and time. And it just happened as we were reborn, both as males. In the past, we were male, female, male, male. And this was so clear to me when I was 21. That answer came so natural. I didn't read a spiritual book. I was only 21. I didn't study spiritism. I didn't do any of that. I was just a normal man, kind of just meeting somebody I was so drawn to, and the other way around. And, I buried him 5 years ago. And we will be together forever. And it's like the next time we will meet as man and woman, or woman and woman. And it was so clear to me. And so what Anna is saying today, and it resonates, it makes sense. Do you understand what I mean? It's just logic. We're talking about the spirit, right? So, and yes, you're saying like we have so many other things in our minds. We just need to see the straight and clear line of clarity of rebirth and reincarnation. We actually do not die. We just change the car. We call the body the avatar. And it just happens, before we drove a Mercedes and a Rolls Royce, and now I drive a Beetle and she drives a Smart. So it's like, label it whatever you want to label it, gay, straight, bisexual, whatever you want to call it. It's just two souls traveling through space and time, endless time, I also never believe you can be falling in love twice in one lifetime, because you actually can meet your soulmate or your twin soul again. But I believe strongly, and it's not a belief, it's truly a knowing, that we have set this in motion long before we were born. And so, I'm with a new person now, and I felt like I knew him long before I met him. And when I was with my other partner, I would have never even thought that he would leave my life, you understand? So I deeply believe, and now that everything is preconditioned in our soul before we were born, and we live it. And if you stick to our truths, and if we truly live our calling and our purpose, and truly stop looking and learning to receive, and just let the divine give us what we truly deserve, it's easier. Accept it, and don't try to prove anybody else this is the way we have to live. This is just live. I think, I don't know. That's about it. All I want to share.
Thanks for sharing, Andres. Such beautiful comments. Thank you. Lionel wants to say something?
I thought that was very eloquent. Thank you.
Yes. So we go to Anne Sinclair. Hi, Anne.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much, everybody. I just wanted to add my thoughts as well, in terms of, I think, like what we perceive as we are as spirits we don't have a defined sex. We are pure energy. And as we come into the different bodies in the different times, we have different types of experiences. So if I'm a woman in modern England, it's very different to being a woman in Afghanistan or being a woman in a different part of the world at this time. But if I was a woman born maybe 200 years ago, my experience would have been different. So all the experiences that as a spirit, that body can give me at that time, in that place, with that combination of people and socioeconomic situation and all that, affects me as a spirit in my development and my understanding, and let's say my growth. But I think an interesting thing that is modernly observed is like men, because I'm interested in childbirth, men nowadays are much more involved in the care of their babies. And they've done some studies in Sweden where they show that men who care for their babies, their newborn babies, their levels of oxytocin go up, which is the hormone of love, which is very much associated with the feminine, and their testosterone goes down, so that they are more gentle, less likely to harm their babies. And that's not because they want to be like that. That's just a natural biological response to the caring of the young, so that they need to adjust so that they can care for the young carefully. And I think that by having those experiences, we have families nowadays where in the past, it would always be the mom who take the baby to the baby clinic to have the baby weighed and everything. In the baby clinics now, it's not uncommon to have a dad come and say, no, my wife's gone back to work and I'm a stay-at-home dad, because this is our choice. I prefer to be at home looking after the child, and my wife prefers to go to work. So it just shows that a level of freedom that perhaps we didn't have before because of social constraints. And it's just, I think, experimenting all those different ways that as spirits, as eternal spirits, we can develop and learn from all the different experiences that come into our different lives. And that in terms of judging or having an opinion about other people's experiences, there's no place for that, because each one is completely individual and we have no idea what's going on the outside, never mind on the inside. So if we focus more on what are the multiple possibilities of our own lives, we're probably doing better. That's just want to contribute.
Yes, thank you, Anne. Lionel, would you like to say something?
No, nothing.
So I think we have Jussara and then Tanya.
Yes, very, very quickly. It's about Andres, sharing his own experience. I was remember of the books from Joanna de Angelis, Family Constellation, where she says exactly that, Andres. And I think that we are living in a time that what many people are calling, a time of chaos, because it seems that, values are becoming different. And because, now we see all the relationships within the spectrum is exactly what comes to tell us, to announce a change in the paradigms, and one of them being love is love beyond form. And so we are moving each time more towards this direction, that what is going to be, first in terms of a relationship is not, the physical body, the wealthness, the family. If it's same sex, not same sex, it is actually love. And we already find that written in the book, in this book by Joanna de Angelis. So I think all this that we are living now is that, and thank God that is coming more out in the open. So everyone it's each time more changing their level of acceptance and understand, and it's actually to come to this understanding that love, it has nothing to do with the physical form.
Thank you, Jussara. Thank you. So, Tanya, please.
Hi, thank you both for a wonderful presentation the last couple of sessions. Just a couple of questions. One was relating to dream analysis, which Jung looks at from a very symbolic perspective, and you gave some lovely examples there. And then comparing, contrasting with some of the spiritist books, notably André Louis books, where I remember there was one where there was a dream where a grandmother of a woman was comforting her when she was asleep, and she was free from the physical body, she was being comforted, and the grandmother was telling her to not pay attention to criticism and the barbs coming from others. And she used a lot of metaphors in her language. And so when the girl woke up, she remembered it as a very mixed up dream, where, you know, the word snake was used, but she would see an image of a snake. But she thought that she met a snake in her dream, but it was just her grandmother was talking about a snake. So when she spoke, a thought form of a snake emerged. And so I'm just wondering that this, you know, for me, I'm now kind of having looked in a very superficial way, you know, many years ago, that I see it now as the symbolism may actually be that there are encounters with other personalities in the spiritual dimension that that we come back with. And so maybe it's not necessary, I'm just wondering, maybe it's not necessarily or anima or animus, but it could be a character that has an impression on us. So that's just one thought that comes to mind. And the second question then was in relation to anima, animus, that we have both, right? And so even I as a woman will have the in the unconscious, or who, you know, any woman will have both, but the more unconscious perhaps the, as you said, sort of the exploratory, I can't remember the act of the explorer and the intellectual in the male, that may be more unconscious. But to me, it's, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking that there would be both within the unconscious, but maybe one would be less or more conscious, depending on the society or the family that we're in, how acceptable to express one is. Or am I missing something?
Lionel, thank you, Tanya. I think it's a great question. I would like to hear Lionel first.
Well, there were two parts to it. The first part was the comment that in dreams we contact spiritual entities, and I'm sure that's correct. And they don't always take masculine or feminine forms. So that I agree with. The dream is one of the points of contact with the spiritual dimension. And sometimes we do see personified spiritual energies in dreams that are not male or female. And the second point was that both men and women have both male and female qualities in them. It's just that the opposite sex quality is more inaccessible, harder to get to. But of course, you're quite right that we both have both in us. And I think you made the point that some families will allow one or other to be accessed. Like there are some families where they won't let the boys develop any feminine traits. And there are other families where it's okay to do that. So I agree with you that a lot depends on the family and the culture that we grow up in, whether we have access to these opposite sex traits. Especially you see in fundamentalist Christian families, they get very exercised about gender specificity, because they have a lot of sexual anxiety. The more sexual anxiety you have, the more you repress the opposite gender traits. That's why men have always dominated women, because they've been terrified of women, so they've had to control them. And that's still going on, of course.
Lionel, have you read any of Chico Xavier's book? Tanya refers to one of the spirit called André Luiz that Chico Xavier psychographed. Have you read any of them? No, yeah, not yet.
I have read some of his material, not all of it. It's too much.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
500 books.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I remember this before going to Gabrielle. I remember, I can't remember, maybe Jussara remembers which book is this, where André Luiz refers
In the greater world.
In the greater, I knew you would know.
And the greater world talks a lot about, psychology, the different states of the mind. And yes, but are you thinking about the mental houses as well? Or?
No. I was just thinking this case that Tanya remembered, where the girl meets the grandmother, right, Tanya? In the spiritual realms, and there is the grandmother wants to warn her that she should forgive, something like that, should forgive because there is somebody who was being very treacherous to her, like that's the word snake that the grandmother uses. So it was a spiritual meeting, right? But at the same time, that's what Tanya, I think, wanted also to ask, if I'm correct, Tanya, and understood your question, that when the girl wakes up, Lionel, she remembers having dreamed, she thinks she has dreamed about a snake, because the grandmother in spirit tells her the image, oh, you have to think that this person is like a snake, but you have to forgive her, this and that, and tries to remember the granddaughter about the spiritual values of forgiveness and things like that. I think it's a case more or less like that, right?
Yeah.
Sarah and Tanya and some.
Yeah, the book is another one. It's not.
I think it's Missionaries of Light. I'm sorry.
Yes, Missionaries of Light. 38.
The grandmother
38.
comes. Sorry,
yes.
The grandmother comes because people were being very critical of her because of her financial, and she was alone. She didn't know what to do. So she was doing something that everybody was criticizing. And the grandmother said, don't pay attention to what people say, because if you pay attention, they are saying horrible things about you. It's like a snake that grows, but if you forget it becomes like a glass and it breaks. So when she wakes up, she has that feeling of feeling well, she's feeling quite happy, and she thinks of this snake, and she sees the snake becoming glass and breaking 1,000 pieces. I think it's Missionaries of Light. Sorry to
interrupt.
It's Missionaries of Light, chapter 38. The symbolism is the snake, and then the snake is a glass snake. It breaks into pieces, and then she sees like a flower. So this is the symbolism for her to be,
thank you,
for
Jussara.
resilience. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Jussara and Silvia. So my point is just here to talk with Tanya and Lionel, that since as Lionel said, and I think Jung agrees with that, I think in his autobiography, he talks about, right, Lionel, a dream where he meets his deceased wife, and another dream when he meets his deceased father, that he knew it was a spiritual meeting, those kind of.
Yeah, it was a visit from them. Yeah,
visit from them. So, but since the spirit is still connected to, we were talking about that, to this personality, this body, this acting in this ego, in the conscious life, the way the spirit is going to remember is through symbols, right?
Yeah, I mean, this the spirit can appear in a dream as a wind, for example.
Yeah.
Which is also a biblical image, but it doesn't have any gender. Yeah.
Yeah, so even if it's a spiritual encounter and not only a psychological dream, let's say, but I think the important thing is the message, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the experience to the spirit and what is being taught, or through this meeting. Doesn't matter if it's with one's own personal contents that are our self capital S, trying to talk with the ego and exchanging messages, or a spiritual encounter. But the important thing is what we learn with that, what we make as consciousness, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, Lionel, what do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, the spirit will manifest in a way that gives you what you need to compensate for something you're not paying attention to bring something to your attention. And it can take, many, many ways of doing that.
Okay, have we answered your question, Tanya? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think now it's Gabrielle.
Boa noite. Good night. Sorry. Thanks for this moment. It's a topic that is very complex. I will try to be brief. So we have both inside us now, psychology, in our PCK, I don't know how to call. And this is something that helps me to understand, because where I grow up is saying women needed to be more tidy, organized, well behaved, smile. And this takes out of the attention of the professional life, let's say. But when we grow up and see different things, and actually to see people, I'm a heterosexual, but it's good to have friends that they have different sexualities and other and different behaviors according to what is expected by the sex or the gender, because helps to understand that we can all develop different things, different qualities, and I think, yeah, I'm trying to understand, because as I understand, as far as I understood from the Spiritism side of studying books from Spiritism, we reincarnate in a certain body and gender and other things, because this will help us to develop certain areas. But this doesn't mean we can have other qualities that so that's what I understood from the class today, saying that we could try to help the male part, I don't know, animal, I forgot, trying to help the woman, as I understood myself, to be more proactive, like the lion and other things. I'm only trying to say is, my comment is, in my case and many of us, society says women should be like this, men should be like that. But actually, we need to have both. And it's one thing that I think this class help us. We need to have the equilibrium, maybe, and try to have qualities of both. Is that you're trying to say, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and because only one thing is, I don't know if I can bring this very fast to you. I particularly have a great fear or something like that of very powerful male figures. And I think this resonates with a problem that I have with my male thing, I don't know. And only to understand this, because we women sometimes we think that we are not capable because we don't have the same qualities as a male. And well, It's only to bring this to you. I think it's very important to comment these things that make us to believe that we can do things that society sometimes says that is not possible. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriele. Maybe Lionel could, because of your question, could talk a little bit about, because Gabriele talks about fearing outside figures. How could we explain better to everyone, Lionel, this projection?
You mean she said she has a fear of powerful men. Was that it? Exactly something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, there'd be lots of ways to understand that. I mean, I don't know Gabrielle history, but she may have had a very domineering father or something like that. So that could be a transference problem. Or it could be that she grew up in a culture where women were regarded as less powerful than men, and she introjected the cultural attitude of dominant men and passive women. That's a cultural problem in many places. So, there could be a combination of explanations for that. But the fear goes the other way. Men have, in patriarchal religious systems, have dominated women because they're afraid of women. It's very important to remember that. They repress women, or they try to, because they're frightened. Women make them feel weak and needy, and they have there are all kinds of taboos about menstruation and all that kind of thing. And the mysteries of childbirth, and it scares men to death. That's why women have been repressed in patriarchal cultures.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole discussion. It takes a long, but that's basically
Thank you.
I think we have time for one or two more comments or questions. Elsie would like to. Okay, you have the microphone, your microphone.
Yeah, one short. Because I heard Sylvia and everybody talked about, and I feel almost the same. We are worried about the same thing, and I ask and I think about that the animals or men and women in the future, far away, not now, but more far away, will be more diffuse than difference we already practice, because this is not practice. It is about better world and better life or so. But we are not prepared, not yet. But it's like a practice, because here in Sweden, I agree with Sinclair, because here is very, very, sometimes you don't know where is Papa, father and the mother, and children is together, everybody. But it's nice because we don't worry so much. I must dominate. I dominate. I must do. I must. When that happens, they divorce. They be divorced. But because it's a little bit. I don't know. I can't explain so much. But I think that in the future, maybe when we spirit be more clear and understanding and understand better moral and love, I think this difference be diffused. I ask her.
Okay, thank you.
Here, not another world stories. We have many reincarnations
in the future.
Yes,
when
and
we are all archangels or whatever developed beings. Thank you for your comments. So Sylvia, one more comment or question, and then I think we are okay.
No, just very quickly. I was just, because something that Gabrielle said, I was thinking about this book that Roger Wooga wrote about the feminine, about the goddess, and how, the different personalities that women had, and how Athena had a lot of the masculine because she came from her father's head, Zeus. And it's very interesting, I think, now thinking back, that book has to be brought back because it explains so much the anima and the animus in the feminine, and so something I have to reread that again, because I think that sort of reminded me. It's very interesting how the different goddesses, thinking about the Greek mythology and how they come across, and that combination of the animus and the anima in each personality of the feminine. And of course, as a woman, if you have them all together, and actually is that what I think Lionel was saying, and to be perfect, we should have both in balance and equilibrium. Yeah, that's just a point too. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Lionel, would you like to comment?
No, I think that was well said. The balance is the important thing.
Okay, so anyone wants to say, we are in the last minutes to say the last words. Andres?
I really enjoyed the sharing. Actually, it was a really beautiful, fascinating subject today, actually. And I think it has followed probably everybody around on the screen in one shape, form, or another, since birth, since puberty, since relationships, since death, since changing orientation. I mean, and I think we will probably carry that with us until the day we die. So it was probably, for me, it probably was the most enlightened and most exciting subject we have spoken about so far. I really enjoyed the other ones as well. It's not what I'm saying, but really, it really made me feel good. It made me feel like we shared something I already knew, which I had clarity of, and I think many people probably have as well. And if they didn't, I hope so. They'll probably have it today. So yeah, I think it was very enlightened, and I think there will be a lot of growth. That's it.
Yeah, thank you. And also, a lot of people wanted to talk today, so I think it was a very rich discussion, right? And that everybody's feeling more comfortable to share. And I wanted to thank very much Lionel for his being able to be with us today, and especially to sharing his dream. But I think it's so important that we can share our personal experiences, right? As Andres did, and because it's like this, when we talk about growing, evolving as spirits, and we are talking about differences. There are differences here in this experience when we have an ego and a personality. But as everybody is saying, it was saying today, in a spiritual dimension, there are not differences at all. Well, there are differences in a way that we experience, and the things that make each consciousness, it's the richness of the person or the spirit experiences. But as we were talking about the archetypes and the spiritual dimension, the objective psyche, we are enriching, we could say, the experiences of everyone. Everything that we experience, if we are talking about this transpersonal dimension, right, Lionel, and joining with the spiritist knowledge, Jussara and everybody, Marcia, Silva, everybody here that reads a lot about spiritist knowledge and the books. So we are saying, and this is my last comment, that everything that we experience, this richness of different lives with different personalities that includes gender, but also other different cultures and a lot of different things, enrich the experiences of the whole, of everyone, of our humanity, of our archetypes. So I think it's beautiful that we can practice here when we are reincarnating, sharing already without being worried about what people are going to say or think if I say this and that. Thank you so much, all of you. And I'll give to Fabrizio that wants to say something.
Yeah, for me, just a quick one. I have got loads to share, but I won't share tonight because we are on time, but I will share due course. But what I can say is we have been talking about the importance of having the anima and animus, a way of having those two forces in us balance it out. And I have suffered from that for many, many years through my childhood when I was dealing with my own homosexuality. And I have done therapy many, many years to try to find that balance, because I came from a family where they were very religious, and some kind of my family background that because I was man, I have to behave it this way or that way. And I was in conflict because I was basically, I had to be the dominant male, where I have to be very masculine, I have to be this, I have to be that. And that was imposed on me by society and so on. And that caused me so many conflicts. I have to go and have therapy to deal with all those issues that was going on in my mind. And I finally came to terms with that. And I don't have to be any of this or that. I just need to embrace both of them in me. And if one is more predominant than the other, so that is what I am actually living that with me at the moment. And I have to come in terms with that. And I will give you a lot more testimony and share more of my experience on this later on. But the great thing about it, and I think Jung said that also when he talked about our shadows, we need to embrace our shadows, not to put them on the carpet, accepting everything in us. That is also another thing that we should always also embrace it, because some people might have some issues with, oh, I want to be more feminine, I want to be more masculine, and people want me to be this, people want me to be that. And then that generates so many conflicts in us. But I think whatever we are, just embrace it as it is and dialogue with that and come with terms with what you are. I think that is the best approach for us to grow spiritually.
Thank you for sharing, Fabrizio. And thank you, everyone. And let's go on with this wonderful talk with the soul, right, Fabrizio? Where we can be what ourselves want us to be and do, and not only our ego, and worrying so much with all this outside issues. Because when we change ourselves and when we are in peace and harmony with ourselves, we are in peace and harmony with the world. So let's go on. A very nice week to everybody. Thank you. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
See
you,
you in
Lionel.
July.